Once you start a lie, you've got to build on the lie, and the lie starts getting bigger. In fact, exponentially bigger, bigger and bigger. And you can never tell the truth because then you've exposed the lie that you've been telling for years. But why do you want to expose a great lie that makes a lot of money? Now, observing these two explosions, these two different nuclear tests, one thing's very obvious. There's certainly a huge colour shift. One is red, one is yellow. So they had different metals in the explosion to create the different colours. Now, I would think that they would all be relatively the same. Certainly the one on the left really just doesn't look right. But in fact, these mushroom clouds aren't right. Because look at, there's no explosion really much on the ground if you look at the one on the right and left really. You get a clearer vision of ground level, of course, on the right. See, it's all sort of a puff of smoke in the air if you really examine it. And even if these are fair dinkum pictures, which is probably debatable in itself, but let's just take that they are real depictions of explosions, they're not that big, are they? It's just a puff of smoke in the air. It's some sort of like firework device, it looks more to me. There's not a big explosion on the ground outwards. It's just this big cloud because that's what people have come to expect. That's what looks effective and has a certain scare factor. Now, this is taking mushroom clouds to another level. This is the freestanding mushroom cloud. Now, this is amongst nuclear explosion shots. Now, I ask you, just shows the hoaxery running deep. You see, I don't think people have ever really looked at these explosions against other explosions, all the different explosions in the different countries. And certainly if you go to any of the Chinese stuff, well, you're going to see something telling there, just like you see with Jade Rabbit. It's not quite the quality because in China they can sell it easier. A few loud bangs and everybody gets excited and goes, oh, wow, wow. It's a little bit more discernment in the West. People want a little bit more spectacular and real convincing looking imagery. But I mean, the floating mushroom cloud here is way strange. Why the gap there? Is this Photoshop? Is this reality? It looks very, very peculiar. And if this was the only image that was peculiar, but every image you can drag up and you can go through yourself and look under image search and you'll start to see, just like 9/11, so many different smokes, so many different looks. It just doesn't look right. But if all that variance in the look of the explosion and the fake look of those two that I showed you in the beginning there doesn't convince you that this nuclear weapons industry is nothing more than a drain for money on the public strings and a method of control and fear, here's the aftermath of the explosion at Bikini Atoll. Now, what was glaringly obvious to me straight away is how come one area is just so green and this area here is just so burnt? People say, oh, it's just the angle and the dangle. Well, I can see this has been flame thrown. That's really what it looks like. And not only that, those trees have been cut with a chainsaw or an axe. Look at the angles on the trees. It's how you cut them so they fall. And you drag them away. They're not snapped by any explosion. That's absolutely balderdash. If they were snapped, they'd be ripped and teared and there'd be bits of bark teared. I've worked on trees most of my life. I know a lot about clearing trees and what ground looks like. And we get bushfires here and people go and cut some of the trees and that stumpy look there looks exactly like what I've seen many, many times. It certainly doesn't look like a nuclear blast in respect to those palm trees and other trees over in the yonder. in the distance as it were, are just perfectly sitting there. This is supposed to be pretty recent after the blast if it's all cindered like this. In this tropical world, it only takes a matter of weeks and there's little tips and things and everything carpets up pretty green pretty quick. So this is within a week or two at the most of the so-called blast. And we have perfect green vegetation and chainsaw cut trees and just a flamethrower cindered look in a fairly small area too, I might add, but enough to convince the unknowing public of the 50s and 60s, and they already had them in duck and cover mode. So, I mean, a little bit of bikini atoll, and there's that old little sex card they throw in, a bit of bikini. And that was aptly chosen, no doubt in my mind whatsoever. So there you go, you see. You'll have to stay tuned for my next video where we'll really get into a little bit of the science of it all. But I just wanted to show the basic things here of why it's so wrong. That is balderdash. That has been cut with a chainsaw. Now you see, when you've got one really big hoax going like this, you've got to add the old shooters in the woods. There's nothing like a few little conflicting stories, stories of heroism, stories which build dialectic, and stories which give what you're doing credibility. You know, all these hippies go and blast their boat. Yeah, sure, look at it sitting there on the side. And what's the telling thing here straight away? Anyone that follows mine or Dave J's or any of the other people of sense here, they always cover ISIS and CC, just say CC. Now, what more do you need to see to know that this is a hoax? Now, if this is a hoax, well, this is attached to the nuclear weapons hoax, or nuclear weapons, so you don't think it's a hoax. Well, this is a hoax here. And you know what it's like? One hoax, one narrative leads to another narrative, and backwards and forwards, and they feed each other. Now, if you can accept that this, because of the CC, because of CC's pizza, because of ISIS and the black flag of ISIS, and this is years ago, you see, nothing new. If you can see that, then you can see how flawed this whole nuclear business is. Fear factory number one. And it's like a monkey on everyone's shoulder. Isn't it good when you can see they can't push a button and destroy the world in seconds like they say?